T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey folks, welcome to the Launch Sequence Podcast. Got you here for another week. We're going to talk about Star Citizen stuff, space stuff, drama stuff, the good stuff. 4.0 has lost some of its features, but also gained a few over some time. We're going to chat about that and the significance of this update still. But we're also going to look a little bit at some of CitizenCon's past news, the first 5 star systems, how things are going with the lead up to the new progress tracker that has come out and all the 1.0 sort of elements that they want to deliver. We got just a lot to talk about. News, development, all the jazz. And for today's show, I've got my friend AstroHistorian, who does plenty of his own coverage of this kind of stuff. So it's always a good talk. Thank you for joining me, dude. How you doing
Thank you for
today?
having me on. Doing good. I actually have the day off of work for it is. Well, it wasn't even one I had to take off myself. It was just the work was the school was like, we're shutting down on Friday after Halloween. It was like, sweet, I'll take it.
Impressive.
Yeah.
My school, they tried to give us extra homework on Halloween. I appreciate it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's because it's technically Diwali. So it's I think it's a Buddhist holiday. I could be wrong with that one, but it's we have a lot of Southeast Asians who live in Austin because a lot of people from like Vietnamese origin and other places. Mm-hmm. So often school shut down because it's like, hey, we can't get enough people, or we think our pay will get cut a little bit, like for attendance. So that's my theory. Other than that, I'm just not going to question it. I get a 3-day weekend. I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
I don't do that often.
Good to hear, dude. Hey, maybe they're giving the kids a day off because it's voting week next week. They're like,
yeah,
I mean, you're gonna have to deal with your parents, so we're gonna, I don't know, give you a vacation.
They get the election off as well. So
what?
Like, I don't. Yeah,
man.
Yeah. Well,
why don't businesses do that?
That's a completely different conversation.
Well, folks, we are back in California now, sitting here in my sister's childhood bedroom as we transition and sort of start looking for places to rent out here. But we're back. If you're watching this on video, you can see the background is like not complete. Everything is just random and together, and we're making it work. But that's just now time zones will be a little bit better. So if you are a supporter on Patreon, YouTube, or Twitch, first of all, thank you. It goes a long way and it helps us out a lot. Our live podcasts, which you can come and see as supporters, are taking place at more reasonable time zones for you guys and for our guests. So thankful to everybody for putting up with that. But let's jump into the good old discussion, dude, because we've got a lot to get to. Let's hit off the big ticket first. 4.0 has seen itself somewhat of a feature cull. I wouldn't say it's actually cull is probably not a good word for it because it's not.
Gut is the word for it.
Yeah, people are saying it is getting gutted.
They have filleted it like a fish.
Gutted. To some of you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there's no bones about it. It's a lot smaller than it should be, especially since a lot of the stuff is also coming in 3.2, 4.2, and 2.4.3. A lot of stuff is coming in as well. So it's kind of that. Okay.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty key part of this whole situation is like it feels small, partially because some things have been pushed back, but some things have also been pushed up. And we're getting them in 3.23. And like, I think there's something to be said about receiving updates or receiving features over a longer amount of time versus getting them all at once, especially for something like as climatic as 4.0. It probably does make a bigger difference if those features were held off and all delivered at once with 4.0.
Yes, I would agree. The problem is that that's not how brains work and how people's hyped work. Like people when they see thing come out, they see a long list of changes. They're like, look at this change. I think that's probably to a degree why a lot of people are upset about it, because it's instead of look at big list, it's look at the small list comparatively to what was before.
Yeah, list is smaller.
List is smaller.
Can confirm.
Perception is reality. when you're dealing with stuff like this. So what matters, and CIG knows this because we talked about this before that in the pre-podcast, but the stuff that was pulled out is actually 6 of the 7 things that are pulled out is just one thing that CIG just put in there because they're all like derivatives of that one thing. So when you look at what's actually pulled, there was actually only 2 things, but that doesn't matter because it's 7 things on that list that's pulled. So that's number big and big number scary. And like, I'm not trying to deride people about that. It's just more of that's how our brains work. We see big number. We see big number be a bad but big number. Our brain go, this is bad. Be angry or be sad or be confused or upset or scared, whatever. Like, that's just how we work. So
yeah, and it's a pattern too. I mean,
yeah.
I think
that's a conversation that we'll have later, I'm sure. But
yeah, it's awful that this is happening to a 4.0 that happened after 323, because 323 went through basically the same thing and was marketed and pushed and hyped just about as hard. And
not to mention I'm not going to call it gaslighting because I think people overuse that word, but the big mistake of trying to cover up the fact that 3.24 was going to take longer than they thought, or the things that they're take longer than they thought. So they went on and said, "Don't worry, this isn't a month's thing," and it was a month's thing.
yeah, it was.
And they didn't come back and clarify that ever as why it was going to be a month's thing. They just sort of didn't say anything, which is a problem because I'm sure they didn't have a solution to the problem, so I didn't say anything. But that's connected to this whole thing about, like, I think a fundamental loss of trust in a system that used to be really inaccurate. And then a friend of mine and yours and a lot of people in the communities, Jake, came in and really did clean house and fix a lot of those problems with the roadmap and those sorts of expectation setting. And then this year, it just blew that all up. Just exploded it.
Yeah,
So
I think I think they've burned a lot of the goodwill that they built up with the release view at least being somewhat reliable.
mhm.
But absolutely, dude, this year is 2 patches turned into 4, and is it even 4 or 3?
It's 2 patches turned into 3, but it's really only 1.5 patches because we're not even getting half of 4.0. So it's 1.5 patches.
And
turned into 3.
the messaging going through this whole segment of time with this year is subpar, especially considering how much we've already been through. We've been through CIG. We've gone through a lot. We've gone through the rapids with you, into the wilds, and it would be fantastic to set our expectations better.
I think it would. The biggest problem was something that I know I did. I'm sure you had the same thing. There's clips of me saying this when Jared came at the end of the last year and said this is going to be a big year, and then specifically said 4.0 is for summer of next year. I said no, you don't say that. You've just opened up the box that you cannot close. You've just put yourself in that. And the CIG, the swagger. I said this at the beginning of the year. The swagger that CIG walked into the year with was swagger. It was bluster.
It was high.
It was overconfidence.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. When you came in overconfident, everyone's swinging, be like, yeah, this is going to be the best year ever. And you release 1.5 patches and call it 3.
Dude, the vibes, man. They were kicking the vibes off. They were like, okay, we've given you the show. We've shown you stuff is coming up. This was gameplay, baby. It's not even that far away. And then they're like, well, wait, hold on. Hold on one second. Sorry. Hold on.
Yeah. We're going to be quiet about it.
It's like been a solid year now, and we're still at about 50 to 60% of what they showed. And I do the stuff that we've gotten. I appreciate for their own reasons, but this whole communication thing, I feel like we're having the same conversation we were having in 2021 or 2017.
I would say, I think if I always, and this, I'll say this to the listeners and the viewers here, put yourself in this perspective. Just remove every promise that CIG made, and then just look at what CIG has released and think and tell yourself, is this bad? If you were not told any of the promises and you just saw these release, would you be excited about the game or would you be upset about the game? I think most people would be excited because there's a lot of stuff that changed. The brand new HUDs, the new star map, the new interior maps, new changes to the FPS systems, new changes to, like, they added the resource system with 4.0
this year.
Yeah, this year, overall,
Okay.
this entire year.
Mhm.
They've added a lot of things, changed a lot of things. Some things a little bit more controversial than others, like the thing that someone's already. This is your standard mandatory master modes comment. It's going to be in the comments, but that sort of thing.
That
But
was already made.
I
We're like
know
10 minutes in. That was made
it, it was
8 minutes ago.
like the second the video went up, someone typed it in like I don't care about 4.0 unless it's changing master modes. Let's put it in there. I said that last time I was on, and I found that exact word, those exact wording in the comments. Whoever the commenter
It'll
did
be
that.
there, dude.
Thank you for your service.
I don't care what this podcast is about, okay? It's not if you haven't removed master modes yet. Jesus. Stop talking.
But I do think that this was actually a pretty big year in terms of content, in terms of playability of Star Citizen. There's been bumps and there's problems. It's Star Citizen. It's a game in development, but we didn't have nearly the same level as we had last year with 318 and 319, like basically half the year unplayable. That really wasn't the case for Star Citizen this year.
Yeah.
And there's still a lot of big things. And if 4.0 reaches the full release, it's Pyro, jump points, asteroid stations, the contested zones, the repair missions, plus like everything else in Pyro and everything we already have in Stanton, but also in Pyro, jump points.
There's also like the outposts
events.
are pretty cool, and I think it depends heavily on what they can get running in these outposts, how many NPCs will be there, whether or not they're even interactive, those kinds of things. But Pyro is an entire new star system. Like we used to be pumped when we were getting a planet or a moon.
Yeah.
Like in the 2018, 2019 days, we'd be like, oh, ArcCorp's in 3.3. It's in 3.7. Oh my gosh, this is going to be so cool. We're going to get the moons with 5 new bunkers. And it's like, expectations are different now because the game has gotten so much bigger. But if you just take a step back real quick and look at Pyro and the amount of space that it provides, it doesn't matter if that space is in Stanton or Pyro. If you have a problem with new locations because they don't bring new gameplay, it's not going to matter where they go. It's the fact that it's there to be filled once server meshing allows them to start actually running AI or whatever stability changes they need to do.
Yeah. I think if you look at it from that perspective, I think this year would be pretty okay. But the problem is that people don't look at it that way. They look at how the vibes. They judge the vibes of something. And if the vibes are off, dude. if you have the vibes are off, then the game is the worst thing that's ever been done. It's the all of those sorts of stuff.
I need good space vibes.
Yes. And so like this is it's always hard to say this sort of thing because like no matter what, especially since it's so polarized in the community right now, when you try to explain anything, someone's going to get mad at you. So I'm just going to say like, I'm not attacking you for not liking 4.0. I'm not saying you're not allowed to not like 4.0 because they removed engineering. I'm just saying don't catastrophize the loss of stuff in 4.0 as if like you cared about engineering enough to actually care about it.
What do you mean, Paul? We can't call them out every time they do something. We can't talk about the things that they've missed, huh? Are you saying that if I want to complain, I should just choke on my own spit and die?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
No criticism allowed.
No criticism allowed. Never. No, there's a conversation to be had, and I think we talked about it earlier, which is like the problem is for this, at least from my perspective, isn't really that they cut things. It's that they told us that these things were coming out and then cut it last minute when they knew, at least probably before citizencon, that they weren't going to be able to make it. So either somebody messed up and someone messed up last minute, and so that means that they don't know what they're doing, or they knew and they hit it because they knew it was going to be bad, and so or they decided to wait to drop the bomb after citizencon or to the next roadmap roundup, which I don't think really works with how CIG works. But there was a screw up. They screwed up a while ago. They had a time to reduce these features, but back in like beginning of October and before citizencon, and they chose not to. So that's really the discussion in my mind that's more important, is how can CIG improve their communications? And I feel like Groundhog Day.
Dude,
How
yeah,
can they
we
improve
talk
their
about this. We talk about this so freaking much, man.
I
Oh
have
my
talked about
God.
this just about every single time I've been on the launch sequence. Every single time in the launch sequence,
Yeah.
this has come up at least once.
And we've talked about it on Inforunners. We've talked about it
Yeah.
on Captain's Table. We've wanted to do videos talking about it. Like, there's just so... This is what it always ends up coming back to.
Yeah. Because if CIG was better at managing their expectations and talking with the community in a way that they treated us like adults and people who backed the game, rather than either pretending that there's no problems, or hiding, or there's so many, like, the problem is when you do mushroom farming, you get mushrooms. When you treat your community like mushrooms, you're going to get mushrooms. And for those of you who don't know the mushroom farming thing, it's when you keep people in the dark and feed them garbage or poo, you get mushrooms. That's the joke.
Okay. I thought,
Yeah.
well, like, some mushrooms are cute, you know, like
They are,
hey.
but like, you get fungus when you keep things in the dark and feed them poo.
Okay, that's
like
fair. I hear you now. That makes sense.
You don't, if you want to grow a forest, you don't build a mushroom farm. And they want to grow a forest, and they're building a mushroom farm. Like, that's the problem. And they need to figure out how to not be so quiet, or at least managing expectations better.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, man. And the thing is, like, we know that these things change over time. But there was at some point, I imagine, and I know for a lot of people who maybe come to the streams and like watch the videos and deep dives, I've touched on this example quite a few times, so it probably is annoying at this point. But hacking, why was hacking said it was going to be in the preview channel? They can't even release the ship that's related to hacking. Like, it is the sole ship in the entire year that they wanted to get in, and it's being delayed because hacking is not ready. Why in December did we get told we would be doing hacking? It just, like, there was no need for it. No necessity whatsoever, because nobody was expecting it, right? It wasn't like, oh, we're putting the FPS crosshair on the tech preview. People would be like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. I'll try that out. Sure, why not? Hacking is like a whole different type of gameplay we've been waiting a long time for. And to say that that's going to be on the preview channel, along with the new quantum travel effects, it's just like, it's these sorts of things where they're trying to raise hype, and hype doesn't need to be raised, because just a normal year without getting our expectations set too high is a good year for us.
Yeah. I would enjoy, like CIG, just try half a year not saying anything. talking about what's going to be coming out, obviously, but don't put a date on anything, and then don't even say, like release a PTU without even the card being up through 4.1. Just release the PTU, and then once the PTU is good to go and you've confirmed everything, then release the 4.1 cards, so people will go, oh wait, check out all this cool stuff that's in 4.1. There's this new ship, but look at the patch notes. It'll also get people to read your patch notes. People will read the patch notes and pull it together. I know. I'm a big teacher, man. I gotta make sure to express literacy even in the most illiterate communities. So, but that sort of thing, it's under promising and over delivering. If CIG can do that for 2 patches, I think they would get a lot more enthusiasm and encouragement back, because again, perception is reality. If people think that CIG is under promising and over delivering, then they are under promising and over delivering. Even if internally they have frustrations and hiccups and things don't make it the way it is, externally people don't know. So people are just happy. And that's just what it is. So,
man, just the way that the things have gone with this release view, just like you said, we were in a place where we could not really trust the roadmap, because they put it out too many quarters in advance. They were never very accurate about that. They acknowledged it, they shortened it, and then, like you said, Jake came in, they made it a little bit better in the messaging. The release view was pretty reliable.
I think Jake used to boast that at the most they had pushed 4 items since they took over the roadmap. So we're talking 3 years with only 4 or 5 things being removed. That's impressive. So,
and then now it's like, I know it's marked as tentative, but now it's like you can't point somebody towards that and be like, okay, yeah, this is what's coming in the next update.
Yeah.
And it's hard to fault them for that when they're like aiming at a moving target like they are, especially with
Mhm.
server meshing being so integrally involved with 4.0. But at the same time, man, what's the point of a roadmap if you don't know, like if you don't know if that road's still going to be there in 3 months?
Yeah. How can we follow a road that doesn't exist?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So that's negative feelings about it. I'm sure. I'm sure there have been several people who've clicked out of here, commented that we're all negative and
I,
dooming and glooming.
I will say, like, I'm upset with CIG's messaging, but like, I'm excited for 4.0 because I still firmly believe that 4.0 has 3 to 6 months of content.
Yeah.
I've heard people say, "Oh, it's only a couple of hours." Now you have
So-
like 6 months of things you can go through and find out, and it's an entire solar system. Like, come on, guys,
Yeah.
let's be real about
So
it.
yeah, this is that part of the podcast where we go back into 4.0 and look at what is it actually still bringing? Is it actually still the biggest update in our history? And actually, here's how I want to kick it off.
I was going to say, do we want to talk about what was cut first, or do we want to do that after? Because we haven't actually said what was cut.
Geez, yeah, talking for a while about that, huh?
We're talking about it.
Okay, we'll talk about what was cut real quick. But when we come back to it, I do want to know if this is still a major update if you took server meshing out to look at the other stuff that's coming in.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll get back to that. So what was cut from this that we've been talking about for the past 15 minutes?
The big ones. I said this. I think we said this in the very beginning, which is it's actually 2 things rather than it's 7 things, but it's actually 2 things. The 2 big ones are life support and engineering, and life support really is engineering. And then the other ones are fire and fire extinguishers. You can't have fire extinguishers without fire, and you can't have fire without life support, and you can't have life support without engineering. So it's engineering, and then there's solar burst and it's like it's at the top of my head. Solar burst and charge and drain. Charge and drain is essential for engineering, and solar burst. My belief is that it's just built around engineering, so
Yeah.
they don't want to really add it in there because it's an addition to the gameplay of experience of engineering. So the only thing that doesn't directly connect to engineering is the transit system refactor, which I think is also a little bit more scary. That's a completely different conversation to have. So it's 7 things, which are really 2 things, but CIG does break them up into their individual things. So it's those 7 things.
Right. So it's interesting that it is all the things that are related to sort of engineering the resource network. What they used to call the pipe system. When they originally built these ships, they had pipes in each ship. They would be for fuel, oxygen, water, and power. And I think that was it. And this was like the idea that
heat, fuel, oxygen,
yes.
water.
Yeah. And this is the idea that a ship would run on a system of resources. And that eventually morphed into the resource network, which was then built into engineering gameplay. So all the things that are related to that system got delayed. And I think the most disappointing about that is that the engineering system requires the work of the flight team, the vehicle team, the folks who are working on new ships or backlog ships, as a lot of people want to see. People who are working on flight model stuff, master modes, control surfaces, missile systems, weapon systems. Like, those people are also working on engineering. So some of the work that might have gone into those things that you wanted to see worked on this year didn't, because engineering was being done on a lot of ships. And I think that's probably one of the more disappointing parts of that work being pushed back. It's like, okay, well, we gave up other things to see this, and that's still not happening, at least not yet.
Yeah, that's valid take, I think. There's to add a little bit of hopium, or I'm sure as the folks, as many people are mad to say, the copium. We've seen all of these systems in place. In fact, at one point they accidentally added it to 3.2 4.2 when it first released in the Evocati. They accidentally added the systems because people were like, "What is this?" And they're like, "Oh wait, that's not supposed to be there."
Yeah.
And so they pulled that out the next patch. So they have the system working internally. They've showed it off internally. And even if we're going to be as doomer as possible and say this is just 3.24 all over again, 3.24 took 3 months for it to come out. So engineering coming out in March, okay, it's 3 months. It's like most of this stuff is coming out in the near future, not in like being removed from the roadmap and never happening again like
Yeah.
they used to do in the past.
Yeah.
So,
Thank God it's not like that. This is something that we know is still coming.
Yeah.
It's just not coming in that specific quarter.
mhm.
But as an addict for progress, that means
Mm-hmm.
that whatever was going to come in that specific quarter is now coming a quarter later, Paul, and I like new stuff.
Which also means that anything that was going to come out in that quarter is probably going to be pushed to the next quarter, and it's going to delay even further. The chain reaction, like I've pointed it out before, and I think CIG is always negligent to factor in these chain reactions. So,
And that ends up coming back to in 2026 when Squadron 42 is scheduled for 2028. Sorry, y'all. We had a couple quarter slips. Just 2 years.
yeah.
So yeah,
I still have faith, but yeah.
It's engineering is a cool piece of gameplay. I'm particularly very excited for it, but it being pushed a quarter really doesn't bother me that much from my let's have fun aspect of my mind. It bothers me more from just like I want to see new things aspect. And I don't know how many people feel that way, but I think there are a lot. Like you just want to see a big new system that changes ships come into the game, and seeing it delayed like this is kind of a hit because that's a transformation. 4.0 is transformative.
I 100% agree. I'm with you on that one. I am still mad that it got pushed because I wanted it to come out because I wanted it to be out. I have been and always will be of the opinion that as long as Star Citizen is an alpha, then move fast and break things. Things need just to be pushed out, broken, buggy, and unplayable mess. And then once they get more things in and they get all the stuff they need to get in, they can fix the problems later. I know that's not reasonable with a project like this because they have to make it playable because right now people are crashing all the time and people are say it's unplayable and getting upset about it. It's like, yeah, it's an alpha, but they have to make it playable because if they don't make it playable, people might stop opening the wallets and paying for the lights to turn on. So
it's got to be playable, man. That's the only reason it survived.
The problem, God, I'm just joking. I'm laughing because the idea that Star Citizen has ever been really playable in the past is kind of funny to me. I know it's been more stable in the past, but like
Screenshot Simulator will bring in a lot of funding. All right,
that's true. But I blanking on my thought about it. Just in general, like I understand the need for a playable thing, but this also isn't the final game. So I'm hoping that with more people being interested in 1.0, that people are more interested in seeing it move that direction rather than just staying where they are and just improving what they're playing. So
well, that's also kind of why it definitely counts to follow the game and have a pretty decent idea of what's going on with it, but maybe also don't get too tied to the way that things work or might work because everything's going to change. Like we see it constantly from ships being balanced to even like some significant changes. Like they just said this past year that logging on and off won't be linked to beds anymore. You'll be able to do it anywhere through some way. I thought that was weird, but you know, not being as closely tied to it to the point where it's going to ruin the game when it does change leads to a lot less game ruining moments. I've seen so many people this year be like, I am completely done with this game for this reason. And I'm like, you don't like boxes in that color? Like don't let something super small ruin it for you. And that has nothing to do with what we're talking about here with 4.0. These are not small things, but just like that's general Star Citizen advice. Don't get too tied to anything that's like too small in particular, because it'll disappoint you. And with that being said, let's talk about the things in 4.0 that we do like. So we lost.
You said you wanted me to say about like, do I think 4.0 would be still a major patch if it lost?
Yeah, let's go with that first.
Sorry, I just saw something in somewhere else, but yes, I think it would still be a major patch, though. At the same time, I think that's server meshing is so important to the game fundamentally. It's just not sexy. Like
It's
no
not.
one's going.
It's
You don't
really not.
play server meshing. Like I think I've seen a couple videos where you
You don't
mentioned the game.
flirt with server meshing.
No,
no.
you don't have an epic gamer moment with server meshing. It's just a thing that exists in the back end. And whereas, people myself, and I'm sure you as well, really enjoy like the process of watching how these things are made, how the sausage is made. To the average person, nobody cares about server meshing. It's just technology. It's exciting, but technology is not going to make the game fun. The game designers have to make the game fun. So I think Pyro is really the thing that your average person would be excited about because it's a new system. It's a lawless system. It has new factions. It has new settings. It's more in depth than I think people give it credit for. It's a lot more interesting. It's definitely a change of pace and sets up a nice groundwork for future. But I also know that you would never have server meshing. We wouldn't have Pyro without server meshing. I don't think it's possible for them to have done Pyro without server meshing. So,
I mean, Stanton's not even possible without server meshing. Look at how the servers perform.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people are saying like, well, it's awful right now. It's like, yeah, it's because it needs server meshing. Like everything, it's 4.0 without the server meshing, and that's why it's crashing all the time.
I think there's also just things that go unsaid. Server meshing isn't sexy, like you said, but there's no release view roadmap card that says player count boosted to 300 players, and that would be huge. Like when that was something that really, I think it was 3.12 maybe, or something like that, 3.12.1, somewhere around there, where they boosted the server size from around 50 to 70 up to like 100 to 120 or so. And that was a big addition for people. And I think still having like 3.0 had a lot of stuff that wasn't listed as being the big hallmark additions of 3.0. But it also had a lot of small things that made a big difference, like the player count or the size of the space increase or anything like that. And I think 4.0 has some of those same attributes that aren't necessarily in your face until you start playing a patch like that. And you're like, oh, there's twice as many people at this landing zone now.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of small things. When I played the Pyro preview, for instance, what really hit me was the vibes were different, man. The
vibes.
The feeling was so different. And because of that feeling alone, the novelty is really what hit it. And I don't think that novelty will wear off with most players because most players don't no life Star Citizen 24/7 like a lot of content creators do. So I think that the vibes are going to carry Star Citizen, the vibes of Pyro will carry Star Citizen for multiple months. But yeah, like as you said, the server meshing is just, it hits you differently when you sit there and you go, there are like 400 people sitting around me right now. You're like, that's like going to Area 18 when I went to go pull a ship with one of these tests, and I went to go in and there was a line. There were 17 to 30 people around me just at this landing zone, and they went to go get their own like ships. And eventually I got in and got my ship. And as I was getting my ship, like 4 more people were arriving. And then I think there were a couple people behind them. It was just a stream of like 50 people coming into Area 18. And I knew that I'd never experienced that because I know that likely they were spread out across all the different systems in Stanton. So it was like, there's like 400 people on this server right now.
Yeah. And that's an obvious sort of change. There could also be little things that can pop up, maybe not in 4.0, but possibly 4.1. Like imagine if there was a release view card that said extended overhead NPC ship traffic now around jump points and space stations. That on its own is a huge addition. People would lose it if we saw that as a thing that's coming in a specific patch. And those kinds of things might start happening. We don't really know just yet, but I think it's a lot of losing the forest for the trees again. You see some features leave this update. The update's not as big as it originally looked because some of those features even came in earlier. A top tier feature got delayed from it. You don't see that there is a fundamental addition in this patch in the form of server meshing that goes way beyond just this patch. Like, of all of the features that have ever come out that could get better and better as time goes on, server meshing's got to be the top, right?
Oh yeah, no, it is. I've often said that server meshing is the game. Star Citizen is just a vehicle for server meshing. And that is the technology that they developed. It is the technology that will carry them through. It's kind of like the water physics in Sea of Thieves. Like server meshing is going to be the thing that Benoit will be doing GDC talks at in 6 years. About how they can get the kind of density and content that they have. Um, and there's a reason why everyone in the industry is suddenly very interested in server meshing, from Ashes of Creation doing it to UE6 apparently trying to have native versions of it. Like
Rockstar.
Rockstar has talked about it. Yeah, tons of people. And it's weird that they only started talking about it after that Star Engine trailer came out last year. Suddenly everyone was like, wait,
Well, I mean,
this might actually be the thing.
we know that game development's all progressing parallel towards a specific direction, and like it's not like CIG is the first to do server meshing or the only one who can or anything like that. But for a game like this, it matters a lot.
Yes, ESO does it. They do static server meshing. The ESO has done it in the past. It's not Star Citizen isn't the first one to do it, but for the scale and scope that they're going for and the fidelity they do it at, that's I think what causes a lot of people to start paying attention, because they go,
yeah, we
want to keep the good looks of what we have, but we want to be able to increase player count or NPC counts, or we want to increase the amount of things we can do. And this is a way of doing that without having to sacrifice memory and other things like that in our like servers and that sort of thing, server performance and scale.
So the Pyro star system comes in with quite a bit of stuff inside of it. There's like, we talk about things we might get in an update that makes people happy. Distribution centers, more mission locations, yay. New derelict outposts around Stanton. Again, more mission locations, more points of interest to visit. Those are like exciting sort of locational, physical differences in the game you can feel as soon as you get into a system. Into a new update. What is that level of content that's coming with Pyro? How much actual locational, physical, locatable content are we getting with this expansion?
Yes. It's twice the size of Stanton. It has 6 planets, 5 moons. It's got 5 space stations connected to it. The one space station has its own dedicated extraction shooter level. Not to mention the asteroid bases. We don't know how many of those exist. Those are also coming in. There's multiple locations. I think every planet has, last I checked, at least 6 landing like POIs on them. There may be fewer on the moons and stuff like that, but there is a ton of points of interest everywhere you go. Not to mention unmarked points of interest for things like missions, especially for things like mercenary missions. So just the scale of stuff that's available in version 1 of Pyro is probably as much as Stanton in terms of just interesting locations and diversity. So
yeah, it's a lot. One of my favorite parts is that the points of interest, the little towns that you find around the planets, actually have little satellite locations, almost like the Starkitect demo they showed at CitizenCon. I guess this is more of like the early concepts and designs of what they were going for. You find this town or this city, you run around it, there's like 6 to 10 buildings of different sorts. There's some trash and like weapons and loot and stuff scattered about. But then maybe 5 kilometers this way on a little hill, you'll find like a single building with an antenna outside and some power supply. Another 5 kilometers going a different direction from the city, you'll find a little refinery nest or maybe a little bunker in the ground. And like, you start to get the idea that these missions you can get at these central towns can send you to these locations. And you could probably get like a solid few hours of gameplay at just one of these towns on just one of these planets for just one of the factions that they've already gotten into that system. They just need to have the missions there,
Mm-hmm.
That's a ton of, that's so much gameplay potential, in addition to the fact that you have to even get there. You have to get through Pyro, through the jump gate, across the expanse of space that needs more resources. Like, there's a lot going on with this system.
On top of that, it's not one of the few things that's been consistent in the last couple of years. We always know that ships will be released because CIG is just really good at making ships. That's one of
Yep.
the first things they really perfected.
Ships make
Uh,
money.
yeah, ships make money, but it's also one of the first things they actually did. People remember back in the day, the hangar module was the first thing we actually got in Star Citizen. It was just to be able to look at our ships. So ships, and then the process of making ships, they've got it down. They know how to make ships. They're probably one of the best companies, probably one of the best media companies that can make starships in this sort of digital form, because we
Yeah.
know this because they constantly get poached by people like LucasArts and other companies who need those sort of starships for video games and movies and such. Paul Jones getting his entire team poached for some game in Ubisoft, which he's being hush hush about. I really hope he's able to get his UFO at Ubisoft where he's working. But that team has always been there. And I think the other team that's coming close behind that is now in that position of being able to do it is the mission team. Not to give Elliot any big head or anything like that, but Elliot's team is very good at what they do, and they've proven it over the last couple of years by doing things like this year alone they did Overdrive, and now they're doing Save Stanton. Now these missions are buggy and they have problems and they're solely badly optimized at times, but that has nothing to do with the mission. It's not the mission's fault; it's the fault of the game.
It is the mission's fault. How dare you, mission?
So like once we have server meshing, like I can see maybe even an iterative update between the release in December 4.0 and even before 4.1, more missions coming in an iterative patch because they just have them done. That's they've got their modular kind of Lego block system that they work with the mission system that they can just plop together to create missions. They just need a writer to write things up, and then a designer to start placing like enemies or whatever, and they're done.
Yeah.
And so that's one of those things where even if 4.1 is a long ways away, or 3 months away, 4 months away, the actual like content that's going to be released pretty soon after Pyro's released, not only at when Pyro's released, but soon after, there's going to be plenty of missions, new missions, different types of missions, similar iterations of missions that we already have. And at least in my experience, that tends to be what most people gravitate to anyways. They don't necessarily gravitate strictly to the PvP aspect or the open world aspect, to the missions, because they get reputation, money, and it's just an easy way to having fun and figure out how things work. So
yeah, and there's just a lot of places they could put in, different types of resources, different items made with different types of resources that make you a little bit more interested in the loot, make you come back, make you see what else it has.
mm-hmm.
A lot of the places in these locations, while I was looking around, just felt like they were so much more geared towards different types of gameplay than any of the places in Stanton we see all that much. And it makes Pyro feel a little more like a dangerous system rather than what a lot of people see it as, I think, as a PvP system. It is not a place where they want people to go and expect to run into players and get into combat all the time. I think it's just a place where you go to do the same kinds of things you're doing in Stanton at a riskier, higher level. And if they can build enough variety in the missions in this space that they've got us, man, it's a lot of room. There's a lot going on. The asteroid fields look beautiful. The planets look great. Freaking Stanton 4 is some of the best views I've ever seen in this game.
Yeah,
because it's got that asteroid belt ring, and it's also got clouds, so it's got beautiful sunset. Like, holy crap!
The vibes, man, the vibes. And that's what I mean. I think one of the problems is that people don't have 4.0 in their hands. People would be a lot more forgiving if it's like, hey, here's 4.0 for everyone to try out. By the way, we have to remove these things. I think people would have been like, what? Then like, look at the screenshot though. Look at this place.
Yeah.
This place looks like the Scottish Highlands. What are you talking about? This is great,
Yeah, people are also very unhappy about the way that they're doing Evocati now, which is allowing people to talk about it and show what they're doing. So if you are Evocati, you can essentially start posting content online from that, whether you are a content creator or not. Obviously, that gives people a lot of FOMO.
Yeah. I don't personally like it because I also think that people are not ready for the rawness of what Evocati is. And if you're okay with people talking about it, then you're okay with doing Wave 1. But
yeah,
I'm not in charge. So.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, if you're cool with people seeing it, that means you're feeling a little bit more confident about it, which should mean it's ready for PTU. And
Hmm.
so maybe you're just not doing that to build hype, but
I don't know
yeah,
why.
yeah.
So
Um, what else is coming besides Pyro though? So we've got the outposts, the new space stations, contested zones, asteroid bases, which are pretty
mhm.
cool. Did get to see one of those. 6 new planets, 5 new moons, all the derelict areas and locations that are surrounded there.
Repair,
That's Pyro.
yeah, they're repair missions.
Repair missions, right? So you get to
So,
finally be a little fix it guy. What
yeah,
else are we seeing in this update besides that?
we actually look at the release view, because I kind of went over some of this a little bit more. Obviously, server meshing is the big one.
Yeah.
This we talked about that already. The mission refactor is huge. I cannot underscore how important the mission refactor is. It is a fundamental change in how you play Star Citizen in a way that is so good that people are not ready for. Because what it means is, if you crash, you get to the point you're almost done with your cargo hauling reload, and suddenly your game just crashes, and you just, like, absolutely horrible. Like, it crashes. Chris Roberts comes in, like, flying kicks your PC, punches you in the face,
He
steals
does
your
that.
wallet, and runs away like he loves to do. You manage to cobble together something real quickly and hop back into the game. You still have your where you were when you last left. Well, not necessarily like exactly where you were. You may have to go back to where you, like, last were at, but now your mission has persisted. So you now continue to have that mission even if you crashed. So it still happens. And if you're able to recover fast enough, you just pop right back into where you were before with the mission still good to go, and you're good. You're golden. You can even do a mission if it's not timed. You can do a mission, accept a mission, log off, come back tomorrow, and log back in and still finish that mission. So
And that's got a lot of knock-on effects too, because just better mission stability is great. We have a whole bunch of problems. Shout out to all my courier mission folks who try to get
mhm.
3 boxes and deliver them somewhere, only for one box to not be accepted. The game
Yeah,
being able to communicate with the game objectives is a very big part of the mission system being refactored. This is like the same mission system that launched with 3.0, right?
yeah,
Straight up 7 years ago. So we're very overdue for this, and this is the kind of thing that makes server meshing come off as such a big stability boost. Not because of what server meshing does, but because it allows them to go back into systems like the mission system or the transit system and do a little bit more stabilizing work with that stuff. So that is a
yeah.
good one. Good call out. Yeah.
It's also a hybrid system now. So if it's moved from the DGS and now it's a hybrid system, they can change it without having to patch it. They can patch it without having to push a patch, like a hard patch, to everybody else.
That's really
So
nice.
so it's like, anytime they can remove something away from the game, the game server itself, to the backend system, it means they can tool with it and mess with it while the game is running and not cause many problems. They can hot fix it faster and stuff.
Good.
Of course, the most important thing that they're adding to 4.0, the thing that makes 4.0 the patch, the biggest patch that will ever patch, is we are getting the boy,
Moo boy.
the boy, the
The
moo
moo moo.
boy, the space cow. All right, I there is real G's get it. Okay, le moo. Okay,
In space, nobody hears you moo.
suck le moo. Okay.
Et tu moo? Yeah, so space cows. Why should people care about that?
Because it's cool. It's one of the few passive creatures we're going to get in the game. Like, one of the first passive creatures we're getting in the game. We're eventually going to be able to farm them. We can actually farm them by killing them. It adds more immersion to the game, but it is. We've had aggressive predator. We've had kind of neutral flying creature.
Boy.
This adds the prey, the kind of passive prey. So we now have generally the sorts of main categories you would have in a video game. So from now on, it's mostly about taking some of that behavior and then just not necessarily copying and pasting it, but like using it to build other things. Like,
Yeah.
if the Kazi Grazer can probably match up with something like a gazelle or a deer, you just make them a little bit more skittish than them, and a little bit faster. A Copian can work well with a lion or a a bigger, more aggressive creature like the what are they called? The boreal stalkers and stuff like
Hmm.
that they want to do with this. This is sort of the final stepping stone, the final piece before monster hunting and more creatures, which will increase missions, density, life, everything. So
It's it's a good starting point.
mhm.
Yeah. It shows that they've gotten their fauna pipeline kind of figured out. I remember they had a director position for that open about a year ago now. And I
Mhm.
wonder if they filled that and were able to get a lot of work done on that over this last year. Did you count how many animals, fauna they wanted to have for Star Citizen 1.0? Just like in the 60s, 50s?
Something close to that. I didn't look through every single one of them. I think they did. One of the devs actually went through and put a number behind all of them, but I think it was like 50.
Yeah.
Um,
So
so
even if Star Citizen 1.0 is 5 years away, that's still 10 new creatures per year.
mhm.
So it seems we will be seeing a pretty hefty amounts of creature additions from here on. I wonder if it's going to be like an every patch kind of thing or just like a wave every year sort of thing. But
I could
this,
see multiples per patch going forward. Because I mean, you also have to think about this in terms of Star Citizen as a sandbox game, and where anything can happen. Imagine in the future, you're doing a mission to clear out an outpost. What you don't know is that the game has also generated a whip crab hive in near that outpost. So you're in the middle of taking on some local thugs, and your friend comes over to make a pass to shoot the tank that showed up on the enemy side, and you miss, and you hit the ground, and suddenly you hit a rock, and suddenly that rock isn't a rock, it's a whip crab. Now you're fighting outlaws and giant crabs that are coming at you at the same time, and the chaos erupts. And while that sounds like hopium and imagination, it's not really. That's what they described with not only you can happen in their internal builds, but probably in the near future where these sorts of things can run into each other because they kind of have to be able to.
yeah, yeah,
And that
that's the
builds a
whole point.
game. That's a game. That's an experience that you can go, remember that was insane kind of thing. And that's not a pipe dream anymore. That's 3 patches away kind of thing. So
That's what people want in games is to be able to live in that game and see it react like you would expect. That's like the number one thing. That's why immersive sims are so cool and hard to come across.
yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how they can get their ecosystems to do that. What else is there?
The only other big one that I can see on the roadmap is jump points. Well, the location mission repair, which we already talked about,
Right.
uh, but jump points. So that's a total of 22 things on that are in the 4.0 release currently.
Which a big part
And
of that is included in the pyro
yeah, it's the
block.
pyro stuff.
Yeah.
But to give the context, with 3.23, it had 30 items in 3.23, and 3.24 had 20. So less than 3.23, more than 3.24. So
And
around the same kind of numbers, with a lot of it just being the places you can go.
and there's a lot to be said about how much is in each of those patches because all three of those
Mhm.
patches have exchanged features.
Mhm.
323 shrank, it received some stuff, and ultimately it's hard to judge where it is compared to where it was originally proposed to be. Obviously, it lost some of its biggest features in the cargo stuff, but 3.24 is 20 different editions, like you said, and those aren't all. Those
Originally
aren't.
slated for
Yeah,
3.23.
yeah. Like
Some of them are 4.0
some
stuff.
of the
So
some of that stuff from 4.0, some of it's stuff that just randomly came into 324. So like
mhm.
whatever 4.1 is going to be something largely different than we could even expect or try to predict right now. And like you said, also some of the features that were supposed to be in 4.0 are in 324. The Zeus, the two Zeus are in there. I believe that they probably wanted to get the Polaris in there when they had 4.0 out before um, IAE. The Argo Atlas, I'm betting, was 4.0 related. The MFD rework and new displays. the multi-crew updates, the rock caves and acidic caves. Like there's some decent amount of stuff that got pulled from 4.0. So it's
Also, that's not on the roadmap. Resource network.
right.
That's
That was there.
I think it was. It's not even. I think it's in 3. Is it in 3.2? No. So they mentioned it in the monthly report in the roadmap that they finished the resource network for 3.24. So that's why we have the new HUDs with the new power management. It's in there. It's just not connected to engineering yet.
Right.
So
Yeah. So once again, don't look at the number. I mean, for 4.0, I would say it's the one time when you should look at the number, but look at the features.
Yeah.
Because anything can switch to anywhere. And I would say 4.0 is still a pretty significant update, just given we don't know how far they're going to go with the missions. I think that's the big thing is like, how are the missions really going to play? How much localized gameplay will there be in Pyro? How much of a different experience will you get from Reputation with factions? The way that that plays is going to be the key to how successful 4.0 is, but just the fact that server meshing is coming in, I think puts it on top. Would you say it's still the biggest update that we ever get, or what's a bigger one?
I think it's going to be the biggest one since 3.0, and the only thing that'll be bigger is 1.0, and that's only because 1.0 is the game. You know, it's the final version of Star Citizen before they expand beyond it. But
you don't think like the patch where we get Nyx, Castra, or Terra would be bigger than this one?
No, because when we get Nyx, we already have Pyro and Stanton, and Nyx, we don't know when we're going to get Nyx. Before all of this, I thought maybe Q2 or Q3 of 2025. Still could be Q3, but still, like Nyx. By the time we get Nyx, we'll already have a bunch of other things that will be added between now and then. It's not like Sage is going to stop doing development. Okay. So we'll at least have one patch, I think, between now and Nyx, between 4.0 and Nyx, and that patch is going to have everything that 4.0 has plus new things. So it's already going to have more things that are already in Pyro. So when we get Nyx, it's going to be neat that we're getting Nyx, but we already have two systems. We've had a system release. It's not as much of a shock to be able to jump through a jump point for the first time. Mm-hmm. It's just another system. And the more we get more systems, it's going to be kind of more even the same, more of the same, more of the same. So
this is the biggest update based off of the significance of it, not necessarily the different features involved.
Yeah, I think this is the biggest one in terms of. I've been saying this the entire episode, but vibes, man. The vibes are the most important. Kind of like how 3.0 is not nearly as big as like say 3.18 was, but it was still more important than 3.18 because of the kind of change it was from 2.0 to 3.0. The change between 3.24 and 4.0 is a huge jump just because of that server meshing and allowing for the jump points and Pyro. So
the one thing that bums me out is I think that 3.23 through what seems to be now 4.1 was all set. And I know a bigger update is obviously harder to do. So it makes sense to break them up and release them at different times for stability. But comparing 3.0 to 4.0, if they had gotten everything from 3.23 to 4.1 into one patch, it would have been truly a successor to 3.0. Because 3.0 was just such a big change to so many parts of the game, from the star map to whether you could land on planets, to how big the game space was, to the missions that were being run, to the mobiGlas and how you would get those missions. All those things changed in one update, and now you can see them being spaced out over multiple updates, which is fine. It's something they need to do. But as far as like symmetry, I guess, goes, or destiny or whatever, it would have been cool to see 4.0 really be just like a big heavy hitter like 3.0 was.
Yeah, I still think it's going to be, I think because we've sort of been desensitized because Pyro has been out multiple times for testing and also for, preview. So you don't have this big wow factor like we had with 3.0 when it came out and was like, here's Lorville, goodbye. like brand new planet you can land on. Wait, I can land on this planet? Yeah, you couldn't land now you can. Congratulations, bye-bye. You can quantum to this place and land on it and walk around anywhere you want to. That was just I think jumping to Pyro and just seeing the scale of Pyro is almost as big, if not bigger than 3.0 because of that. Just sort of, you can feel the change and the size and where the game is going. But I don't think we're getting much more wow moments. Like, dynamic meshing isn't going to make people's brains explode like server meshing did.
Yeah,
it's just
that'll be
improvement. So
like kind of a constant just appreciation, I think, of the game actually working.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the wow moments are lesser for sure.
I think we're still going to get those wow moments from new players. When new players come in, are just like,
Yeah, that's fun to see.
let's go. This is amazing. And be like, oh, I remember when I was first jumped into. This is neat.
As chat is talking about, our supporters on live chat during the show are mentioning, we've got other systems that are coming after this. So 4.0 is a big step forward. It brings in server meshing, which is 100%. That's been the goal since 2018, which is just crazy that we're finally there. Server meshing has been the goal to bring in larger player caps to lessen the load on the servers so that more things like missions, AI, and functions of game can run, and to allow us to expand the game much faster. Now, star systems weren't really locked behind server meshing. They could have always been brought in as like a loading screen, but CIG doesn't want to do that. So now we're getting our first new star system with server meshing. But there are more to come. The next 4 star systems have been set in stone, and we know for sure what they are. But when do you think we might see a third following Pyro? And since we already know it's Nyx, what do you think it'll actually bring to the game?
Can I do the lore thing first?
Do the lore thing.
Okay. So, because there's some discussion in the live chat that like while we're doing this, people are actually like, what is Delamar? Delamar is empty. It's intentionally empty. Or not Delamar, Nyx, I should say. Nyx is empty because Nyx is named after the goddess of night. Because it is at the edge of a dark nebula. So throughout its history, which is when you look at the lore of Star Citizen, the lore of Star Citizen is built to justify the gameplay potential of that location. Because the lore is written after the lore team discusses with the developers and designers what they want in that location. And then they take that discussion and go back and write it in to make it make sense within the universe they have. So Nyx's main focus as a gameplay perspective is desolation and scanning, like perception, because the Dark Nebula messes with people's scanners. It's one of the reasons why Delamar and Levski exist, because it was originally just a mining asteroid that was abandoned because they ran out of resources. So it was taken over by a group calling themselves the People's Alliance, who were anti-Mezer rebels. Pretty recently, they actually reached a jump point talking about the People's Alliance and how they evolved. They were originally basically a protest group against the Mezers, and when the Mezers started making people disappear, and not in a magical way.
Oops.
They were like, the empire is lost, like humanity's lost. We have to retreat, and so they fled, and they eventually went to this abandoned outpost in the Nyx system, which wasn't settled by the UEE, but no one was really there. And so they took ownership of this old mining outpost, which they then renamed Levski after, I think, Vladimir Levski. He was a Bulgarian revolutionary who helped overthrow like the monarchy.
I mean, I don't, not saying like I know that, but they did mention it was some old dude, so you're probably right.
I can't remember his first name, but and there they built this town basically, and it's effectively it's been effectively this location where these rebels, who aren't necessarily rebels, they want to overthrow the government. Don't get me wrong, they still hate the UEE and want to overthrow the government, but they also don't want to die. And they know that if they're too loud and too violent, then they'll get the attention of the UEE and they'll just send a fleet in and destroy them all. So they're very they try to balance this. We're trying to be antagonistic towards the current government, but we don't want to be such a problem that they have to solve this problem with violence. And so as a result, it's sort of a system that's on the edge of perception almost. It's very clandestine, and that kind of meets in with like the Dark Nebula, which is hard to see, which means the big feature of Nyx will be scanning. And with Nyx, we're really going to see is a couple planets, the Moraine, which is one of the other factions. We only really have 2 factions, the Moraine and the People's Alliance, compared to the multiple factions of Pyro. And because of all of that, I don't see Nyx being very long. I think it's definitely coming in next year. The question of when next year, because my gut instinct is CIG is trying to shoot for Q2, and
Oh
the
my
rule of
God,
thumb.
Paul.
Listen, CIG shooting for and reality are completely different things. We have seen that CIG's perception of time is so warped that it doesn't even matter. It's most likely going to come in at the end of next year. I think a lot of the things that are causing problems with Pyro just don't show up with Nyx because they already have them solved, like server meshing. I think it's just down to, can they make the system? Can they make the factions? Can they make the missions? And can they make scanning? And they've been working on scanning this entire year, and these other things are going to be solved with Pyro. I think the only other obstacle that they probably want to do is get Dynamic 1 in before they release Nyx. And that could take no time, or it could take a long time. It really depends on what everything
there's a lot of
happens.
A lot of variables there. So I also think that Nyx is going to be really cool because of the whole zero-G landing zone. The idea that you can actually take these big, huge ships that can not normally go down to planets and park them right up next to a full-sized TDD is going to be pretty cool. I hope that they can build in some cool trade routes through there.
Yeah. I mean, it is in lore, it is a pretty big trade route, especially for plucky entrepreneurs who may be skirting the edge of legality when it comes to their wares, but
got nothing to say about that.
Nothing about that. Yeah,
not at all.
So it'll hopefully introduce that smuggling gameplay that I've been hoping to get back. So,
and then the Vanduul apparently might be in the system. Is that new?
No, it borders Virgil. So
but like there's the idea that Vanduul will actually do raiding parties into Nyx. Was that in the lore already?
Yeah. It's been known they've increased. The thing about the Vanduul is that there can be a century where no Vandals show up in any of the systems that they're supposed to be, and they're just quiet, and then suddenly they start showing up again. Usually small raids, and then as those raids progress, they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you have the huge kingship clans show up and just wreck everything. So if you see a raid, things are about to get much, much worse. So
unless you've got Admiral Bishop on your team.
Yeah. Or a bunch of crazy players who will deal with your problem.
Whole bunch of players in Auroras.
That's an example, because I think that's one of the big factors of Nyx is going to be, do you want to go fight the Vanduul? You're going to go to Nyx. And that's going to be the major sort of pool story locations, is go there and deal with the invasion and incursions of these Vanduul. So
guessing that's the kind of thing we'll see after 1.0. They probably want to. Yeah,
that's a 1.0, probably in the main story mission levels that they're trying to do.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised.
Fair. That'd be cool. That'd be very cool. All right, so Nyx is the third system. You're thinking next year. I do think there's a good chance we could see it by the end of next year, but who the freaking heck knows? There's just
the vibes are awful right now, so everyone's guesses are going to be off. So.
Yeah. We'll see. After that, though, is a system that a lot of people have found a very sudden excitement for, and I know you have been predicting for quite some time now.
Sorry, victory posing.
Give us the rundown of why you thought Castra would be system number 4.
The simplest answer is that CIG at one point did a roadmap. Not roadmap, but the progress tracker. Remember when the progress tracker was accidentally done alphabetically? Well, and everyone realized, wait, you can just track it by alphabetical. So when you did all things and tracked it by alphabetical, there were two things that were in P region, around the P. And I did the math. I'm like, okay, these are both planet. These unknowns are definitely planet stuff. And I was like, well, if they're doing 2 planet stuff, what systems that we don't know already? Because we knew Nyx and Castra, Nyx and Pyro and Stanton. What system has 2 planets that's nearby? And I just went through all of my information that I could find, and I found Castra existed and has 2 planets, and it has 2 jump points, one to Nyx and one to Nyx and one to Pyro. And when I realized that, I was like, oh my God, it's Castra. Like it's just lines up perfectly with what they want, what they did. And then as the more I looked into it, there are a shocking number of concept art pieces for Cascom. Like there was like,
and there
5.
always have been too. Like it was one of the first they ever really fleshed out.
so it's clear that it was one of those things that CIG really wanted to do early on. The idea of a city in the clouds and the sort of the visuals, they really wanted to like nail that. So it may have been Chris's or somebody else's in the team's really favorite thing to imagine, but it was there. They had it. So that also means, because the only other systems that had nearly as much concept art was Stanton, Pyro, Nyx, and Terra. So it's like, oh, in hindsight, look at all the systems that they did well early on.
Yeah. Yeah, I probably could have substituted my Magnus guess with Castra. I think I was too hopeful for Magnus. Just wanted it so bad.
As somebody who will call Magnus their home, at least their origin, especially in Squadron 42, I feel you. The problem with Magnus is that there's literally one concept art piece. There's just one. Yeah. And it's like, it's sort of, Drake is the only lore you get in there. And if there's really no lore other than Drake or other than a manufacturer, or just like kind of one thing that's already in the game, it means that the writers really didn't have to make it up. And if they didn't have to make it up, then they didn't bother. Whereas like Castra, as the years went on, it has had more and more and more and more stuff stacked on top of it. It's mentioned in the Tohill Regatta. It's been mentioned in the Perry Line stuff. It's been mentioned in what's called the Bremen Beltway, which is this smuggling, when they smuggled out rebels from the UEE during the Mezzer era. It was specifically mentioned. It's like constantly mentioned it, which means that they wrote a bunch of stuff for it.
Yeah,
because they were planning on it coming into the game. So
it's a cool system to add, and I think I really appreciate that they've got this system that's all frontier, and it's got like a little more alien kind of planets, just slightly. They're still fairly Earth-like. You've got like the corporate systems with the very wild seasonal difference with the snow and the clouds, and then obviously with the Ecumenopolis. And then you've now got Nyx also has something interesting with its 0G landing zone. And then you've got Castra. It's like literally a city on top of the clouds. There's so much variety in the sci-fi you can experience from this game in just the first 4 systems. Then we're going to get Terra. Like the 1.0 of this game is going to be a space nerd's freaking dream. As long as you don't need everything to be perfect physics-wise.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll be better. But you mean like, it's like a one-to-one
like orbits and all this. Yeah. It's sorry, you're not going to get it.
It'll be like a space opera. I mean, like those are all those, what you just laid out are just basically different settings for a space movie.
Yeah.
The corporate system, then moving to the lawless system, then sort of this asteroid base, and then this former military base with this island in this, island amongst the clouds, and then this, major hub where that's like the arc of a story somewhere in there, which Absolutely. I think is probably the reason why they did it. But yeah, the Nyx or Castra being a former military base is another reason why, because they'll flesh out more military aspects. But because it's only 2 systems too, I also don't think it's going to be that difficult. The real hard part about Castra is Gascom or Sherman specifically. Which was why I'm sure we saw it pretty recently. We're in the stages of what it was at CitizenCon, because I'm going to say things that are going to make you upset and make the audience upset. But I think in CIG's mind, this is not my mind, this is me trying to climb inside of the brain of Chris Roberts and pull some switches, is Nyx, in their mind, I think they're trying to get Nyx out by Q2 of next year and Castra out by Q4 of next year.
God,
I don't think they.
Jesus,
I don't think they will do it.
Why would you even breathe that into existence, man? Oh my God! Somebody clip that.
Yeah,
we're coming back to that.
I want to hear this. I want to hear this time next year when we do this again, when Tomato has me coming on in like November of next year to see if we're not all dead. If everything works. So
all right. Yeah. So CIG's internal state of predictions. So let's just say Q4 of 2026.
Yeah, I think Q4 of 2025 I think is their internal predictions, but I think in reality it's probably more 2025 or 2026. Probably like
I think so.
Castra.
That's safe.
Castra is a perfect system to add for Invictus of 2026. Like, because it's the military system. You want to have the military system with the military celebration. It just the like adds right themselves. Like, go visit Castra, the new system, not because it's a new system, but because that's where Invictus is being held.
It kind of fits, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's also introducing a new architectural style. So we've had utilitarian, which is largely a lot of Stanton. That is Lorville and Area 18 and the space stations. And then we've got high tech, which is Microtech and Orison, and we've got colonialism, which is Pyro. So we've got 3 architectural styles being built out that are supposed to fill up the libraries that they can use to create additional star systems as they go. Castra is introducing a new architectural style, Henoism. How do you think that's going to affect the development of the Castra system versus something like Nyx, which is probably using the colonialism outposts?
Probably
said.
I think it's going to take them a little bit more longer. I think that's the reason why it's going to take them a year. Buildings aren't too difficult for CIG to do, but it's an entire library they have to build now.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be nearly as like big, but Henoism, the idea of Henoism, I believe, is in terms of the lore, is it was built as this sort of Soviet brutalist style architecture, big concrete blocks to represent like the defensive nature of humanity because of its conflict with its Cold War with the Xi'an. So I don't see this being a lot of outposts in that. I mean, they may have a couple of outposts that they'll build with it that are just sort of like old military redoubts that exist throughout Castra. But I see that a lot of this stuff may also just wrap up together for Terra, because I think a lot of these things will end up in Terra as well, like the Henoism, the colonialism, and the frontier, or the corporate. I don't know.
Yeah, I
it
think
is.
absolutely. We'll see all that. Streamline, I think, is also popular in Terra. Yeah, it's cool how, I mean, it makes sense for them to do Terra last so that they can combine all these architectural styles. I really do hope that the mixture of the different asset libraries they have, some good algorithms for, I guess, randomizing and procedurally generating locations, the factions, and the sort of archetypes of each place. I hope that this architecture thing actually works out, because that's a lot of locations to try and make things feel a little unique.
Yeah, that's. Do you bring that back to me again? You think they're going to do Starchitect for have Starchitect done for Castra?
No. I just, in general, like the production of Star Citizen, I hope that they can use Starchitect all around the game, wherever they go, from Terra to Sol to wherever, to build out the locations well. But I do think that they'll have some level of this new point of interest generation tool by the time we see Castra. Yeah, I think that seems like a lot of the things that seem like they are 1.0 kind of things they talked about at CitizenCon, I feel like are going to be delivered in piecemeal. That's how CIG likes to do it, right? So I do think that to some extent, we'll see a big expansion in points of interest starting like by the time we see Nyx. Yeah.
They said that as much in the roadmap roundup, that what you're going to see is 1.0 eventually, just sort of the stuff that's in the 1.0 column of their release view just sort of plop into 4.1, 4.2, 4.7, whatever. So over time. So
yeah.
And your chat's saying, do you want me, since I put you on the hotspot all the time, do you want to talk about 1.0 since we brought it up?
Oh my God. Sure. We've gotten through all of the star systems except Terra. So I will say this, my first expectation with 1.0 is that Terra will get dropped in and that will be the 1.0 launch. Like, I think the best way they could do it is to not have Terra in any patches before, maybe just Evocati and PTU, but then have 1.0 launch with Terra as like the fresh new place to try out. It'd be even better if Terra was a starting system, but I don't think it's going to be.
Yeah. I agree with that. The only thing I will say is I think what they'll do is they'll drop all the features for 1.0 in, so it'll be a 1.0 release, but they won't call it 1.0. They'll call it 4. Whatever it is. And what they'll say is, we're going to test it out and make sure it runs okay, run the missions, run the other things we need to for a couple of months, and then they'll do a 1.0, and whatever that time is from when that is to 1.0 will depend on when is the next major sale, because almost certainly CIG will hold off a 1.0 release until a major sale or a major event, which, to be fair, I think is reasonable, because if we're testing what effectively is 1.0 for months before they have that sale, they're still getting all the content. It's just they need to fix it and make it better. So
there's just some level of surprise and interest that I think people get when it all drops right at that moment. There's something that needs to be there to make it the new game, as opposed to just, oh, we're just continuing the same thing without wipes.
Yeah.
As for 1.0, there's just so much, dude. There's so much stuff included in there that
we don't even know all of the stuff that's in 1.0.
We don't even know. Like, they didn't even talk about AI blades on the stage, and now it's on the release view for 1.0. So it's like there's definitely things that weren't even mentioned there that kind of misses the point of there being a 1.0 talk. But even just the amount of missions and stuff needed for the guild storylines, I'm betting they're going to voice act the guild storylines, not just the main storyline. So there's so much content to be made, like not feature development, but straight up content to be made for 1.0. That's got to push it out years and years.
I think CIG has an optimistic time frame that they want to get 1.0 out in some degree by the time Squad 42 is released. I don't think it's going to happen.
No, absolutely not.
But I do think that if worse comes to worse, CIG may prioritize getting Terra out by then, so they can have all the systems out and then focus on the gameplay and the stories and those sorts of things afterwards. But I don't think 1.0 is coming out. The earliest would be like 2027. I'd say 2020, 2027, 2028. And as I said, I think when we talked about it in the Citizen Central, which is the thing that people need to remember, it's not like there's nothing being developed between now and 1.0. It's not like we're getting nothing between 2024 and 2028. We're getting stuff that's going to be iterative and hopefully better and more polished as they go through it. It's the journey, not necessarily the destination. And we'll probably have what effectively is 1.0 well before it's officially 1.0.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of stuff that's just going to be included in the game in general, that as we go past, even just having server meshing in and getting the game more stable, is going to make for a much better experience over the next year or two. Multiple star systems, base building, crafting, economy, all these things will exist before 1.0 does. So it's not like 1.0 is when we start having fun, which is, thank God. What do you think is like the thing that holds back 1.0 the most, though?
Dynamic 2 or the final dynamic meshing, I think is the biggest one. Other than that, the volume of stuff, because like CIG can make missions. We have no idea what the mission's going to be, but I don't think it's going to take them 3 years to 3 years to get Anna to come into the studio and play every character in Star Citizen's main storyline. But they have their own mocap studio. They have dedicated animation artists. They have a very talented team, as we saw with Squadron. They can get a lot of this stuff done probably in a year or two. It wouldn't be that difficult, and even building those missions out probably isn't that difficult with the systems they have already built. But putting them together and then just optimizing it, like bug fixing, improving the graphics, improving performance, all of that stuff is gonna take a lot of time. It's gonna be a nightmare for CIG to get through. So
it really is. And that's why for me 1.0 is an exciting thing, but at this moment in time, I am so excited about Star Citizen and where it's going and the things that are going on with it. But right now, I am my interest is peaked for Squadron 42, dude. Over the last year, since they held the line trailer, my interest for Squadron 42 has quadrupled. Like, I was kind of interested in it just because a narrative story mission in space. I love that. I love a space opera. Mass Effect still one of my favorites. KOTOR as well. But I'm not crazy about flying spaceships. It's cool for a little bit, but it's not my cup of tea. but seeing how much variety in the gameplay and the storytelling that Squadron's going to have and the way that it's done makes me so much more excited than for just another Wing Commander. And I know there's a lot of people who love Wing Commander and want a spiritual successor to that, but I genuinely, that game looks so much more engaging to somebody like me who isn't just flying spaceships than I ever thought it would be. I'm really excited for that. How are you feeling about that game?
You know my secret. And those who don't know the secret, I have spoiled myself on the Squadron 42 story well before this. It's a long story, but you know the term. For those of you who are listening, if you know the term, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. That's effectively what it was. I went into Star Citizen's files looking for a classic audio file that is, Tessa Bannister talking about distress bacon.
I was just in their files. Gosh.
There was a big leak years ago, and so I knew somebody who had those files. So I was like, I want to get the raw file so I can use that for a sound effect. And we went to digging because there's no like Star Citizen Tessa -1 MP4 MP3 or anything like that. It's all just numbers that are the audio files. So we had to go by size, and needless to say, by the end of it, we had accidentally stumbled upon pretty much most of the Squadron 42 stories through those files. So I ended up knowing the entire story. And while I'm sure things have changed a little bit, it's mostly the same as what they had back in the day. So like I knew the whole prologue well before it was released. I knew what was going to happen.
Did it end up translating to screen better or worse than you pictured?
A lot better. Like because when you're hearing the audio files, we could actually hear the Chris's stage directions in the background.
It was that
raw.
It was Chris.
And so hearing the hearing the stuff, like we knew that what was going to happen to Captain McCallan. We knew that there was the it was going to start in Vega and the Battle of Vega, and that a kingship was there and all these sorts of things. So it was like kind of like, oh wow. But with that knowledge, I was already interested in it because the way that I had always envisioned it, based off of what I've seen described and what I've heard about it, was the game is trying to put you in a 12-round prize fight with a heavyweight fighter. And then once you've beat that fighter, after 12 rounds and barely hanging on, 4 more prize fighters show up to challenge you at the exact same time. This kind of never ending, you're just going to keep constantly be pummeled. And it's like this difficulty of where you feel like you were fighting a war. That was the sort of the vibe that was coming off of these, the kind of the emotions that were trying to come out of these descriptions and based off of the audio files. And I think that's been translating pretty well. So I'm still excited about it. Despite knowing the twists in the story, I want to see how it plays out. I want to see where it goes, the characters you meet, because a lot of it is, a lot of people know, is social. We know that from the monthly reports that a lot of what Star Citizen or Squadron 42 is you talking with your crew members and meeting them, figuring out who they are, going to lunch with them, picking up little bits of information here and there about that kind of stuff. And, that sort of experience.
And that sort of points to an experience that is optional. You obviously you don't have to do those things to beat the game. Something a lot of people are wondering about a game like Squadron 42 is, yes, it's not an open world RPG with a bunch of side missions and a quest that you define completely. But is there some level of branching? Can you experience things other players might not? Are there optional missions you can go and take at certain times?
You want me to answer those?
I mean, not specifically, maybe just a simple, here's what to expect from Squadron. Like, people want to know what kind of game it's supposed to be, Is it completely on rails?
Have you played a Wing Commander game?
No. Why don't you tell us how those work?
You, depending on what you do, you can fail a mission and still progress in the story. You have branching narrative dialogues, which can lead to completely different endings. Squadron 42 is similar to that, but the ending is always going to be the same. Like there is a definitive ending that you have an impact on, but not the final choice. And people making references to Mass Effect, it feels like Mass Effect. Based off of what I've seen again and heard and saw with the prologue, Mass Effect is a huge influence on the design style that they're going for. But it's Chris Roberts's take on Mass Effect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what I'm always trying to figure out is like how like they've shown different levels of dialogue being important when you're talking to people, branching stories or encounters, and I wonder how much of that can affect things in the game. Is this the kind of game where people should go in and expect to have an effect, or are they just playing through a story?
The thing is that I've seen some evidence that there will be some impact, that your choices will have an impact. I don't know how much of that's going to be true or not, because again, things change in development. So like even from the early days, Chris Roberts was basically like, I'm going to make Wing Commander in the 21st century. And so if you played Wing Commander, every Wing Commander has branching story options. I think the later Wing Commanders have less of a branching story options and have a definitive ending, but there's usually effects that you can have on the narrative as a whole.
I see.
And I still think that's still the case. For those of you who are watching, you can correct me in the comments below, but I would say it's going to feel a lot more like Wing Commander 4, but evolved to a new generation. So, like you're playing a story, but it's like we saw the prologue. It's an hour long. That means there's 29 more hours left in the story. Nice. So it's not just like a 12-hour in and out or 4-hour in and out story. You're having a good time and you leave. This is like an in-depth narrative. They've talked about doing side missions, like the one that they did, the vertical slice that they showed off years ago. That was a side mission.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they said that was a side mission in the commentary.
Okay.
That was an optional side mission.
Huh.
Like they've mentioned in the past that not every mission will have side missions, but a lot of them do, and some of them are that long. So 30 minutes to an hour long.
Okay.
So I would expect like the main story to take. I don't know what Chris was saying in terms of 30 hours. I imagine the majority of the gameplay is story with some small side missions, but
maybe like 40 to 50 hours of gameplay or of game time, since we know a lot of that is 40. Cinematic.
Yeah. I also wouldn't be surprised if only about 2 hours of that 40 hours is cinematics, because based on what we've seen with the vertical slice and a lot of the cinematics that we're going to see is BioWare cutscenes. You talk with the captain, you talk with your wingman, you talk with your bunkmate, and it's you talking and maybe some small interaction that's going on around you. It's Halo or Mass Effect, and that sort of older style of game development of the early 2000s. So
when I got involved with this, I did not think it would have so many comparison points to my favorite game of all time. So it's worked out phenomenally for my interests.
No, I mean, I let me do it this way. Knowing all the story that I did, and knowing the twists, seeing it play out, I was like, why am I getting Pillar of Autumn vibes from this? I should not be thinking of Halo while playing this. Not because like it's a bad thing, but I was not expecting it.
Yeah.
And I think CG's in such a unique position that, both BioWare and now Halo Studios have effectively fumbled the bag for so long.
They
on
really
those
have,
properties.
Man. How is that possible? They had space games so in the bag.
Sci-fi and space games was their thing, and they've just blown it so badly. And because they've blown it so badly, I think Squadron 42 is in a position where it can release to a major audience with a brand new IP with that same old feel and recapture the magic for a new generation, as well as for the older generations who will be like, why am I playing? I'm suddenly back in my living room in 2002 playing Halo for the first time on Xbox, kind of thing. So
it's
and I really don't want to like hype it too much.
Yeah, I don't want to jinx it. No, I feel you.
Because like I don't secretly, I kind of don't want it to be like that, because I think that puts a lot of pressure on like the community for it to be good. I can't help but think about that because you look at the reaction of Squadron 42 on of that whole thing on IGN. Most people
Yeah.
don't realize it has anything to do with Star Citizen.
Yeah, people
They're
are
just like, this is
enamored with what they've
amazing. This is
seen.
what it,
Yeah.
yeah, like they don't know that it's connected to Star Citizen. So they are very much on board for the Squadron 42 hype train. And it's like,
And
what?
yeah. And we were talking with Luke last week about like what can CIG do to show folks that they can put together a game that what they're building is worth the time or worth the effort. And there's not many things that they can say or do
Yeah.
or show that makes people think, oh, it's worth it that they used all these ship prices and all that kind of stuff. But putting out a good game in Squadron 42 could go a very long way. And
Mhm.
I could like, you are absolutely right. I made a video about Starfield when it was coming out, about how it's the perfect time for a space game because of what SpaceX is doing and the James Webb Space Telescope is doing, and there haven't been many space games to come around, and like space is popping up in fiction or in pop culture more with TV shows and movies, and like it's becoming a very interesting thing again. Starfield had the perfect time to capture that, and I think they benefited from it, but I don't think they nailed what needed to be done to capture it. Not saying Squadron 42 can do it, but I feel like that's kind of the position you're still describing them in. Like it's an open field for space operas, for fancy FPS space games, and the fact that it's not just about flying ships, but also exploring new areas, space stations, worlds, moons, and insides of spaceships makes it more of a and everybody can kind of find something interesting in this game than Wing Commander.
Yeah. I think their approach to what they're doing um with Squadron is such, it's one of the reasons why I think a lot of people are complaining. Like I hear it a lot where people are like, this is console 42 now, because they are appealing to a wider audience with this, not realizing that it's Chris Roberts and every game that he's ever made has gone to console as well. Like he's always appealed to wide audience. That's the audience. That's why he was the wunderkind of the 90s, the inventor of the blockbuster game. Like people don't know their history is what I'm trying to say. You don't understand your history. Read your history.
This here's a history teacher. Listen to him.
He was Kojima before Kojima was Kojima. Okay. Like weird, crazy stuff on top of being like way too into cinematics and storytelling is Chris Roberts' staple. He just went away for 30 years, you know.
Had some trouble.
Yeah. So this sort of like approach, I think it can ruffle some feathers, but it's also definitely going to be the thing that will make Squadron 42 stand out in a way that I don't think other games can, and that will put it on the map. So I don't know, potential.
Having all of that power behind an original IP with its own lore, like that's just a lot of languages, relationships. It's a lot to develop for a game, and most companies don't want to develop a new IP for that, let alone an IP that they have a ton of faith in. Mass Effect went with Andromeda, which reset a lot of what people knew about the game series, and they had to do a lot of heavy lifting to sell that. So to look at a game like Squadron 42 and see all of the work that goes into the scenes of creating an actual cinematic universe like it, I hate saying that combination of words, but really that's what they're building here. Star Citizen is going to continue to build that lore. If Squadron is a good success, I don't think anybody who has been following this doesn't believe there will be TV shows, movies, shorts, books, any other type of media that can go along with it. This could be a pseudo Star Wars kind of story.
Yeah. It just requires time. I mean, Star Citizen is going to be the thing that adds to it. And I think to kind of tie this all back to 4.0 and sort of the stuff and everything in the room, the elephant in the room that is the cuts and everything like that. That is the thing to think about when it comes to the long-term health of Star Citizen. Will Squadron 42 have an impact? I think it will. And based off of the citizencon and what they've shown, I think Squadron 42 is not just the thing that's going to save Star Citizen long term. I think it will eventually be the thing that defines Star Citizen going forward. And that is what's important to look at it. That Squadron 42 and Star Citizen are the same game, and Squadron will lay down the foundation for Star Citizen to build a bigger community off of. Whereas
Yeah.
Star Citizen obviously is good and probably will always have its own sort of niche. Without Squadron, it will never be the same scale as what people hope it will be.
A pretty single player game is much more accessible than a crunchy MMO. Like that, if I was interested in all of this at this point, Squadron would have been like, if I just discovered this project, Squadron would be what was drawing me in, not Star Citizen, because
Yeah.
it's actually, like I said earlier in this, it is insane to me how much Squadron has kind of shifted into my wheelhouse over time, compared to the games I used to love. So I'm very excited for it, and I hope it does well. I really do. I hope that when it comes out, it's low on the bugs and high on the gameplay potential, because we know that the storytelling, the writing, and the I guess the presentation are all pretty top notch already.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Any last thoughts about the current state of the game going into 4.0, coming out of citizencon, that you'd like to?
I'm looking forward to when 4.0 comes out, which I'm pretty sure is still going to be this year. And if it comes out this year, I think that its impact on Star Citizen, it'll be immense. I think 4.0 is going to bring a lot of people back, despite no matter what the people, if people are upset or not. Honestly, 2 weeks from now, no one's going to be talking about the cuts of 4.0. Some people will remember it, like me. I'll probably remember it in the back of my head, where important knowledge like mathematics and
It'll be on every
science should be
comment
there.
section too.
Yeah, someone will always bring it up about that one time that happened, but like majority of people will see pretty spaceships and move on. But the thing that's really important is that CIG maintains any sort of hype and momentum they get from 4.0 into March and June and August and next CitizenCon, because I think that is the real key question. That's the real key problem, is that if CIG can maintain this momentum with this new tech, I think they can pull their own reputation out of the dirt and improve and make it so, because I think most people want Star Citizen to succeed. Even the people these days who kind of criticize Star Citizen, especially big names in the media industry, you hear them talk about it and you can tell that they want Star Citizen to be good. You had Luke.
Luke
What am I
Stevens.
blanking his name? Luke Stevens on the last time, and Luke is one of those people who, every time I've seen him talk, every time I've seen him stream, whenever someone brings up anything related to space, he brings up Star Citizen. That man loves this game and he wants it to succeed, but he can't quite full throat endorse everything because CIG can't quite get their momentum working. And so, if anything, I really hope that CIG uses the time that they have next year to really prove that Star Citizen is a game. And that's really the thing that I think we as a community should be focused on and getting for like kind of leaning on CIG about, rather than they cut engineering, because it'll be here in 6 months kind of thing. Like that's more important than what they cut from 4.0, is how do you go beyond 4.0?
It's the long-term vibes, as it always is with this game, until 1.0, and then none of us know what to do with ourselves.
Yeah.
Play the game. What?
What's this play thing you talk about? We can't talk about the game anymore? So
wild. All right, man. Thank you so much for joining me for this talk, looking at 4.0, where things are with Star Citizen and where they're headed. Before you go, can you let the folks know where they can find your own content?
Before I say that, I do apologize for those 3 people who will show up in the comments and say that they saw my name and on the title screen and said, I can't stand that guy. I'm never going to come watch you there. I'll see you next time. Since they're not watching, you missed a really good show.
You didn't know he said that.
Yeah. But you can find me on twitch.tv/theastropub, youtube.com/theastropub live. And if you like lore content, which is, the brain disease that I have that I must spread to everybody with all this deep lore knowledge that we're talking about, that's huge, very important universe that they've created with Star Citizen. That's impressive. And I'm frustrated because it never comes out. If you want to learn more about that as the game develops, you can check me out at youtube.com/TheAstroHistorian.
Awesome, dude. Thank you again, Lorstradamus, for joining us. We've got plenty of episodes, folks. If you just search through the podcast for AstroHistorian, believe you are the most common guest. You and a couple others been on like 15 some plus times. So thank
Always
you so
a
much
pleasure.
yeah, it's always a good talk, man. Thank you for joining me for this one. If you didn't catch it in the beginning, folks, we do have supporters are able to come and join us live. They're in the chat. They're poking us. They're putting out the GIFs. We see them, and they do to some extent guide the conversation. So if you do support, come and join us for that. If not, you can still find the podcast on audio platforms or on YouTube if you like to deal with YouTube ads. Either way, this has been the Launch Sequence Podcast. I've been your host, Space Tomato, and you've been listening to Space Things and Drama for the last hour and a half. Hope you had a good time. I'll see you all next week.